What's your vibes with Harvey? Is he good, or is he just sort of a compiler in the right situation?
On the field this year, he hasn't been good at all. I mean, when you look at, 55 running backs with over 50 rushing attempts, he's 53rd in success rate. He's 54th in explosive run rate. And that was his hallmark in college, was like, he'll get you the explosives. We haven't had any explosives from him. And even post Dobbins injury, we haven't really seen him like accrue like a super high workload, right? Like he went from 61% of the snaps in week 11 down to 47% on Sunday night. After running a route on 46% of the dropbacks in week 11, he's down to 29%. It was still Tyler Bidet. But let's see this week, because this should be a spot where you're favored against the Raiders. Give him a lot of touches. Let's see what happens. What?
Why are you shaking your head? You're welcome.
Redraft ends, but Dynasty is life. I'm Theo Greminger. This is Dynasty Life, joined today by Rich Hribar. Really excited to have Rich on. We are entering week 14. We're 1 week away from the start of the fantasy football playoffs, and we're going to talk about players whose values could shift. A lot of times in Dynasty, we see players who get a big bump based on how they perform in the fantasy playoffs. For better or for worse, Rich, these next few weeks matter a lot to fantasy managers. And it's sort of the recency bias stays with us the entire offseason. And I have a number of like high profile names on the list. But the first guy I want to pick your brain on, I think has big ramifications for what we'll see in this year's NFL draft. The New Orleans Saints are projected to pick third. They'll pick somewhere inside of the top 5. But there's a chance, I think, that Tyler Shough might survive this thing and be a little bit more than like a half-season bridge quarterback. I think he could end up being the quarterback in 2026, and maybe New Orleans addresses the position in 27. What's been your vibes from Shough and your thoughts on what you've seen from him on the field now for a few weeks?
Yeah, I mean, this is a team too that invested in him at a point above projected draft capital to where they believed something too, right? Like taking him with what, pick 40? It was pick 40 or pick 43, I believe, right there at the top of the second round. And so far since he's taken over, I mean, you see like the glimpses of like what they probably thought. Like if you give this guy a clean pocket, like he can rip. He has not performed great under pressure, but he's a rookie. But we care more about like the clean pocket stuff. That's a little more transitive in terms of projection. So like because typically if you struggle under a clean pocket, like that's just something you can't fix. But you look at him under a clean pocket, he's completed 73.4% of his passes, 7.1 yards per attempt, like pretty solid numbers. And then his completion rate under pressure drops to 42%, 4.9 yards per pass attempt. He struggled a little bit to blitz. There's some limited talent around him, but like you see flashes of like the arm strength and then like kind of what tools you can work with. And he's been a little bit more comfortable in terms of moving around the last couple of weeks too. So I do believe, and I don't know, I'm not in the weeds like you are in terms of where the draft class is right now, because I can't watch much college football this time of the year. But by and large, it seems to be that like it's a weaker draft class, or it's not as glorious as like people maybe thought it was before the season. So they might use that early draft capital to shore some other spots up.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I just recorded a mock draft show with Brett Whitefield. We're doing the 2026 NFL Draft podcast, and you nailed it. There was all these guys before the season, Nussmeier,
every
Manning, Alar, that we thought were going to be like locked in. This year's class is probably going to be 2 or 3 quarterbacks drafted in the first round. And one of those guys, Dante Moore, apparently will get like $10 million if he goes back to Oregon this year. So like he'll make more money at Oregon than he would on a rookie contract this season, or next season, I should say. So it becomes really interesting. Saints could end up just pivoting and going with Shough next year. So it's sort of a found money thing for dynasty managers. I mean, I saw some drafts, even in Superflex, where Tyler Shough, I remember we did that one draft with Pat Kerrane and John Daigle early on, Rich, where Tyler Shough fell to like the 2-3 turn, and somebody took him just because he was a quarterback. So like it's found money for us, but he's been better than I thought. And the Kellen Moore system it's fantasy friendly. They run a lot of plays. It's a high volume passing game, and Chris Olave is going to be locked down for next year. So I don't know, a lot to like. If you drafted Tyler Shough, you might have a chance to sort of re-roll him this offseason or just roll with him as your QB2 next year. He's been a little bit better. So we'll be interested to see which way that goes. We'll go to the high end here. And I constantly argue with Brett Whitefield on this guy. Let's talk a little bit about Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams was QB 21 in points per game in year one. Really a disappointment for a lot of us who kind of moved him way up the dynasty rankings, way up the redraft rankings as a rookie, put a lot of pressure on him. Obviously a disappointment in 2024, but 2025 I think we have to call a big success. Not only is he winning games with Ben Johnson, but he's QB9 right now in points per game. Your vibes on Caleb, what you're seeing from him, the growth, do you think he's good? Or do you think this is just benefiting from like the Ben Johnson system?
It's kind of a 1 foot in, 1 foot out, right? Like my top down stance is right now is I feel like he's still kind of in that Trevor Lawrence kind of Kyler Murray bucket, like where you can get fantasy points, but there's still enough in each direction to kind of wherever you want to take this argument. I feel like both sides have grounds for their merit, because even this year, all of his spike weeks have been like really predictable, right? Like all of his big games, like Giants, Bengals, Cowboys, like very predictable spots. But I also think when you look at it in big picture, he's improved in some areas, like obviously the negative plays. He didn't throw a lot of interceptions as a rookie either, but he took a ton of sacks, like big drive killers. I've done a lot of work on that in the past. But you also look at just the Bears being ahead of schedule, I would say at this point. And you expect like their run game to be good because that's where they invested a lot of like their veteran money, getting Drew Dahlman, getting Joe Thuney. They obviously have DeAndre Swift. And then like it's still work in progress from a passing stance because everyone's so young, right? Rome Odunze, year 2, Luther Burden, rookie, Colston Loveland, rookie. Outside of DJ Moore, like everyone's young and they're figuring stuff out. You start to see more layered in to this offense as it progresses. So I think if you force me to choose a side, I would still take the glass half full approach and say like, yeah, he got better in year 2 in a new environment. I like the pieces around him. We like the trajectory of this team, but also like we saw this a little bit with Lawrence. And we saw this with Kyler too. And like, I still think there's enough under the hood because the inaccurate target rates, like the missing the layups are still in his profile. So those are still bugaboos too. So I could see both sides of it. If you force me to pick, I would say glass half full still.
Yeah, I'm glass half full, and every time he does anything positive, I'll send like Brett Whitefield a message. Big shout out to you, Brett. I'm sure you're gonna listen to this one, but like Caleb, people were ready to sort of bury him after year 1. He's certainly regained some dynasty value. Hasn't regained to like the extreme levels, but I will say if you look at this schedule coming up, difficult matchup this week in Green Bay. Then they've got the Browns coming into Chicago, Green Bay coming into Chicago. And then potential that week 17 game might tilt over. San Francisco hosting the Bears. That's one that we've sort of circled all year long from like a DFS perspective. So I'm very bullish on Caleb ending the year well and him making the playoffs. I mean, it is a little bit of parallels to Trevor Lawrence year 2 with the coach change and everything that was great and then sort of regress. But with Williams, at least the mobility has also been decent for consecutive years. 483 rushing yards as a rookie. He'll get over 400 this year, if I had to guess, somewhere in that 400 range. So has a little bit of mobility and has just been more effective as a fantasy asset. So we'll see which way this thing goes. One guy I didn't put on the show sheet, but has won a ton of games, but I would say it's a little bit opposite Caleb Williams, Bo Nix. Bo Nix, there's some kind of red flags here. Sean Payton continues to sing his praises, and the guy wins all these close games, but fantasy-wise, ran incredibly pure as a rookie. Not so good this year. There's been some really bad performances mixed in.
Yeah, he was a guy I faded outright this year too at ADP. It wasn't so much like so bullishly like in the direction of like Bo Nix is bad, but it was like, he profiled as like a back end QB1 for fantasy and was being drafted as a back end QB1. It's like, well, I can get those guys later. That's why I like looked at like a guy like Drake May at his ADP versus a guy like Bo Nix, because Bo Nix was a front runner last year. I mean, we just talked about a little bit of Caleb, but like all of his spike weeks as a rookie came in like gloriously streaming spots, and this year he hasn't even taken advantage of those. Like it's still his best games have come in pretty obvious spots, but we saw the last couple of weeks we haven't really been able to take advantage of those. He gets another one this week against the Raiders, and we don't even know how confident we can be in that, because the first time they played the Raiders, which was the Raiders going into Mile High. I don't even know if it's still called Mile High. It might be called, I'll always call it Mile High. But remember that first matchup, they played the Raiders on a short week with the Raiders coming off of an overtime game, which should have been like an obvious spot to crush. He was terrible in that game. He was really bad on Sunday night against the Commanders defense that has struggled for 3 quarters. He's been bad under pressure all year. On Sunday night, he threw for 1.3 yards per pass attempt under pressure. That was the first game. It's the Raiders. That was 1.3 yards per pass attempt. He was bad at pressure on Sunday night, though, too. We haven't been able to kind of cherry pick the spots with him. That's what made it even more of a red flag this year. So, and he's one of these guys that like he has mobility, but he doesn't like, he's not a runner. Like he can always like have these games where he spikes for like 40 yards rushing, but he doesn't week to week give you rushing points to lean on. So just a hyper volatile quarterback. He's a guy that I kind of just like not really attracted to, and I'd be kind of like skittish on saying like is a guy that is going to be like a locked in QB1 for the future.
Yeah, and it's interesting with Bo Nix is he was old last year and he'll be 26 this offseason, which with obviously with the quarterback spot, we're not so concerned about guys getting older, but it's a little bit more of a finished product feel than like a Drake May certainly, or a Caleb Williams for that matter, guys that were a little bit younger. And we can't really use that as an excuse. For me, Bo Nix, if we take away that game where it was the Giants game where he just had this the massive spike week, like the counting stats end up looking better than the actual player. So he's extremely tilting. Those names are all sort of like nothing too controversial there. But I got to throw this one out at you. You were the guy who came up with the Konami code quarterback. Like that's sort of like in the common vernacular. People are not like courtesy of Rich Hribar, but you came up with that term. That's your thing. And Lamar Jackson is sort of the ultimate Konami code guy for many seasons. We've seen a significant decline in his fantasy production to the point that I'm doing podcasts this week with Scott Barrett and Pat Carrain on School of Scott, with Graham Barfield on Fantasy Football Daily, and we're like sitting Lamar Jackson. Like, and I know he's a little banged up this week, but my question to you would be, are you giving him the benefit of the doubt and he's playing injured? Or are you seeing any red flags that make you think, I've got to adjust where I have Lamar Jackson heading into the 2026 season? Has he maybe lost a little bit of an edge here? And maybe is not that big of an impact player in fantasy as he was even last year when he was just unbelievable.
Yeah, this one's a little tricky because we're still working on like a very small sample size of him being like to this degree of a bad player. And it's an outlier for his career too. So it's like
four games.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's like, is that a signal for something moving the forward? Because I do think that there's potential for, like, if you're talking about from like a dynasty stance, for Lamar Jackson to be the type of quarterback that might not age gracefully. But the one thing too is like since they got Todd Monken, like they had been making beautiful music together, and up until this point. But I don't think you can use just the injury excuse for him this past month, because he's been certifiably bad as a thrower. And he missed just so many layups in that Thursday game. And it goes back under the hood of the whole month. I mean, he had the highest inaccurate throw rate in the league in week 13. In week 12, he had the highest inaccurate throw rate. In week 11, it was second to last because of the Jared Goff Eagles game. Remember, everyone watched that Sunday night game. And, you know, over the past 5 seasons, 3 of his top 6 inaccurate throw rate games have come these past 3 weeks. And so it's like, is this just a small blip on the radar because he's playing hurt? But you also see when he can't use his legs, this is the part where I think the injury plays in, is that he's not running as effectively. And when he can't run as effectively, we start to see a real low floor. We don't have the outlet to save a bad passing yards. Early in his career, he wasn't a good passer, but he was a good runner, and that's how he scored fantasy points. That's like the throwback Konami code, the Justin Fields. Then we started to get that era where guys started to combine a passing efficiency with the rushing, and that was like broke the mold, right? Like we said, like the Josh Allen years, right? It's like this is why you just can't stop this guy. Like this, like when because like there was always like 2010 Vic would pop up, or like Cam Newton in 2015 or 2016. And it's like as a blip on the radar, and it's like, wow, this is like when you marry the passing efficiency and the rushing, like you can't beat this in fantasy football. And Lamar, the past 2 years, like with Monken, was that guy until this stretch here. So I'm not ready to completely say it, but I do think that I do want to watch him because I do think like as he gets into like his early 30s, and if the rushing kind of starts to dip, he's a guy that maybe doesn't age as gracefully, but I don't want to overreact to just this from a dynasty stance, this stretch. But I will say from a redraft stance, like if you have Lamar this week, I mean, you're like, what do? You're in a real rock and a hard place, because here's what happens if you're in a dynasty league, even if you have to start sit him, if you have another guy, maybe like a Sam Darnold, right, who has a great matchup to play. So if you play Lamar and he sucks, you'll be like, oh yeah, he had been bad for a month. Why did I play him? What a dolt. But if you sit him and he does a Lamar Jackson, like a throwback Lamar Jackson game, you're like, oh, I sat Lamar Jackson. Like, what an idiot. So it's like kind of like a lose-lose proposition this week for you. The spot he has one career 20-point game against the Steelers. Yeah, the highest he's ever finished against the Steelers is QB 12. Now, games against the Steelers from 2019 have no bearing on this. We do this all the time. But the Steelers, the past since week 8, having a lot of quarterback that throw for more than 7 yards per pass attempt. So it's just like, how good are you feeling? Do we have a spike week here? So it's a real, like I said, rock and a hard place way to handle Lamar Jackson right now.
Yeah, and it's funny because a lot of these teams that have gotten by with Lamar Jackson picked up Jacoby Brissett, maybe picked up a Marcus Mariota, and this week I'd feel better about using Jacoby Brissett than Lamar Jackson. It's absolutely wild times, and I think you nailed it. It's the rushing upside. So if he's lost a little bit, just a little bit as a runner, then that's massive for him. For Lamar Jackson, he's finished number 1 or number 2 in rushing yards per game at the quarterback position every year of his career that he took over at starter. This year, he's down to like 8th. So it's really, really significant. I think it's one thing that we really need to monitor. And it's going to be super tilting for dynasty managers sort of to see where he ends up being selected in dynasty startups this offseason. I think there'll be a ton of analysts who will just blindly say this is the biggest bounce back opportunity of all time. Just get yourself some Lamar Jackson. But like you said, the guy's going to be 29 years old. If he lost just a little bit, this is very, very concerning. Rich, let everybody know what you have going on this time of year, where people can find your work.
Yeah, over at Sharp Football Analysis, during the season, I write up every player in every game in kind of great detail. So definitely check that out if you are into the stuff here. And I always say too, whenever I come on Fantasy Points, whatever show it is, if you like the stuff at Fantasy Points, there's a good chance you probably like the stuff I do. I would say like if Fantasy Football Analysis was just music in general, like we would be in the same genre. So if you like the stuff that you get at Fantasy Points, you're probably gonna like some of the stuff I'm doing as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of crossover Rich Hribar, Scott Barrett audiences out there. So Rich has joined us a lot on School of Scott. Big shout out to everything you've done over there, over at Sharp Football Analysis. And a big shout out to the team that we put together.
Oh,
Rich
yeah.
came on. Yeah, we're running pure right now. We're in a FFPC championship week. We've got a really pretty strong team out there. CeeDee Lamb. We've got Rashee Rice. We've got a number of strong players ready to rock this week. So hopefully we win some money and we get a ticket into the big dance starting in week 15. So that was a big gorilla team. We drafted that it feels like so long ago, but that team won a lot of games. It's been a fun one to co-manage.
Yeah, that one's been great. And, I always go back to the draft and, like we even talked about the Lamar thing before, is, just trying not to, you don't want to ever underreact, but you always got to be careful trying to, overreact to as well. And we got in that particular draft Puka Nacua in the second round. And I just remember the whole time of not just kind of standing still, as like not adjusting Puka Nacua. I was like, this dude is a top 5 receiver. And then you had the Stafford back injury and like he slid. And I'm like, gosh, man, like this August, like, are we just overreacting to like this back stuff? Like how much do you play in it? And like, it's been a huge boon just staying firm on Puka Nacua being that kind of guy. Cause I got him everywhere because of where I kind of stayed in him and got him so many spots, even where I shouldn't have got him in like at the start of the second round.
Yeah, Puka's been awesome. On that team, we were able to sort of dodge bullets there, and we were able to overcome losing Sam Laporta now to the season.
Hampton.
Omari and Hampton, we've been able
Scadaboo.
to Scadaboo. Yeah, we had a ton of juice. That team could have been much better, but hey, we'll see how it goes this week. We are a favorite to win this matchup, but things never always go that way. So knock on wood, we're able to get this one. Let's talk about Ashton Jeanty. So Ashton Jeanty, there's sort of two frames of thoughts here when it comes to Jeanty. He's averaging 14.8 points per game. And there's a whole segment of people that say the situation has been so bad, we can't judge Ashton Jeanty at all because this offensive line has been horrific. The quarterback play has been horrific. And this is sort of a win for him to average this many points per game. There's been others who have pointed at a couple of metrics and said, you know, maybe this guy is not the elite prospect that we thought we drafted. I don't think Ashton Jeanty by any means is bad, but is he an elite asset for dynasty managers at the running back position? Like, do you look at Jeanty and say, this is a guy that I have to put inside of like the top 5, top 6 running backs in dynasty? I mean, there was a period of time where during the summer it was, do you take Ashton Jeanty or Jahmyr Gibbs or Bijan Robinson as the RB1 overall in your dynasty startup draft? I think that ship has sailed a little bit. Obviously, team circumstance will weigh it out, but your general vibes on Jeanty.
Yeah, I was lower on him in redraft because of the team environment stuff. I remember writing up even the draft, you know, like they had made no changes to the offensive line. It was just an organization that had no business spending that type of draft capital on a running back. But that's not Ashton Jeanty's fault, right? Like it's, you know, he got drafted there. But that's what you're kind of worried about short term is that this was a complete, objective failure. Like Chip Kelly's already been fired during the season. Colton Miller's basically missed the entire season. They've had Jackson Powers-Johnson. You know, he hasn't played in weeks. The offensive line's been terrible. They probably do some sort of reset at quarterback this offseason. Geno Smith has been certifiably bad all year. So the team environment has been a definite component. I think there's some underlying metrics that are still positive for him. He's been breaking tackles, but then like that was also a thing we did with Trent Richardson. Remember, like Trent Richardson was breaking a lot of tackles in a bad team environment. I don't want to completely say Ashton Jeanty to be Trent Richardson. It's just like, you know, that was an excuse we were making at the time for early career Trent Richardson as well. But him and, another player I know that you had on the sheet was Quinshon Judkins. They're like almost like two peas in a pod. Like both of these guys, if you look at, there's 38 running backs that have had over 100 carries this year. Jeanty's 35th in yards before contact. Quinshon Judkins is 36th. But they both are over 3 yards after contact. Like they're still getting yardage afterwards that kind of is like signals like, all right, if they were in a better spot, this could be working out better. We'd probably like more explosives from both guys. But the Raiders at least been able to circumvent and get Jeanty involved as a pass catcher, like over the past month. So I still remain optimistic because we did this with Saquon too, where like Saquon was such an elite prospect, right? And even had flaws in his game coming out of Penn State, like the corner store, like the old Matt Waldman say, Saquon would just tried to out athlete everyone early in his career, but he was on some really heinous Giants teams. And everyone was like, is Saquon even good? He goes to the Eagles, basically wins you a league last year. I still think that I'm not ready for just one terrible situation to kind of like throw away my priors that Ashton Jeanty was a really, really great prospect.
Yeah, I think we're probably about right where we have him in our dynasty rankings. At least the pass catching has been solid, and the fact that they've used him in that light. There were people pointing out the fact that the guy didn't catch a lot of passes last year at Boise State because they really didn't need him to use him. But in 2023, the receiving work was more abundant and he was more prolific with it. So that has been a positive. The quarterback situation has to get better next year. Just by being healthy, the offensive line situation will be a little bit better. You have to imagine they're going to bring in some linemen. And Jeanty, I think year 2 is going to look better than year 1. A little bit more thoughts on Quinshon Judkins here. For me, Judkins is a player that I really want to push up the board. Just if I'm talking about like early 2026 type stuff, the talent looks really, really good there. I know you mentioned the lack of pass catching there, but I think if we can just improve the quarterback situation in your neck of the woods over there, for the Cleveland Browns. Is there a chance that Judkins just runs pure as a year 2 runner?
We thought we were going to have it the start of the run this year, and then eventually just the offensive climate kind of caught up to him. And he's still fine. Like he's like been like a volume-based RB2. What's kind of hurt him is obviously outside of the consistent scoring chances that the Cleveland Browns do not provide is like you said, the lack of pass catching. It was nice to see him actually get utilized as a pass catcher a little bit on Sunday. And I say a little bit, he had 3 catches for 18 yards, but his 13% target share was a season high. So it's something to build on. He just hasn't been on the field on the passing situations. And maybe that is something that blossoms. We saw that the last year at Ohio State too, where he just split with the guy, Travion Henderson. But he was, if you go back to his first year at Ole Miss, he caught a lot of passes and he utilized. And these types of running backs, I always try to put an emphasis on the bar for catching passes at running back is low. It's usually just opportunity based. Like you have very few guys that are like a Devin Achane that's going to split out and you're going to use creatively. Most of the stuff comes through checkdowns, right? So I think he's capable of being a pass catcher. It's just he needs to play those snaps and to catch those baseline targets, And I do think that he's a guy when you look at like his yards after contact and his tackle breaking stuff, you're more bullish on what he did. And then he obviously came with the high draft capital as well. So yeah, he's another guy too. Like I'm just, again, like I'm probably going to have the same thing. It's like, I'm not ready to throw the baby with the bathwater out. Like, is that something we still say? Is that like
I think you're allowed to. It's still allowed to say that. So go for it. Say it as often as you want. Let's talk about a running back who has caught passes this year and is trending up. RJ Harvey came out of Denver's bye week and again sort of dominated the running back touches in this backfield. Had 21.2 PPR points in week 13 against Washington. 2 touchdowns again. Caught 3 passes now for consecutive games in a row. What's your vibes with Harvey? Is he good or is he just sort of a compiler in the right situation?
Yeah, he's very tricky. So this is the guy I did not like as a prospect at all. Like I was very worried about him. One, he is a Gus Malzahn running back. Like you can't being a running back in Gus Malzahn's system in college is just absolutely phenomenal. Like all these guys have been like really great. And like, he wasn't a guy that ran into a lot of heavy boxes at college. He obviously had, he was just a better athlete too at his like age and physical profile than like a lot of the competition he faced. So I was just really worried about his transition into the NFL. And then he ended up getting like that draft capital that was like massively higher than I thought we were going to get.
The landing spot.
The landing spot. But to be fair, the landing spot I always thought was kind of a red flag too, because Sean Payton, the guys he's been pretty overly bullish on, like haven't really worked out. This is a guy who traded the remainder of his draft picks 1 year for Adam Troutman. He traded a bunch of picks for Marvin Mims and then never played him. It still is happening. So like, I didn't know if that was as much of an endorsement as people thought outside of like the New Orleans Saints running back production of years past. And then on the field this year, he hasn't been good at all. I mean, when you look at, 55 running backs with over 50 rushing attempts, he's 53rd in success rate. He's 54th in explosive run rate. And that was his hallmark in college, was like, he'll get you the explosives. We haven't had any explosives from him. And even post Dobbins injury, we haven't really seen him like accrue like a super high workload, right? Like he went from 61% of the snaps in week 11 down to 47% on Sunday night. After running a route on 46% of the dropbacks in week 11, he's down at 29%. It was still Tyler Bidet kind of working in that capacity. So it's still really weird. And we talked about Bo Nix earlier too. Like it's the weird thing about Sean Payton, this version of Sean Payton, is I feel like he's trying to replicate what he did with Drew Brees. And he doesn't have the pieces for that. Like, Bo Nix isn't Drew Brees. Don't try to make him be Drew Brees. And like, don't try to make, RJ Harvey be Alvin Kamara. He's not gonna be Alvin Kamara. So like, it feels really weird the way like this team's being coached and utilization. I'll say I'm just a little more worried about him because he wasn't a prospect that stood out to me, and other people did. So like, other people probably be on the other side of the fence. So I'm probably, out of all the guys you got me talk about so far, this is probably the guy I'm more glass half empty. But let's see this week, because this should be a spot where you're favored against the Raiders. Give him a lot of touches. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, let's see him get a lot of touches against Vegas. Let's see him put up another big fantasy number. And then when you look at the fantasy football playoff schedule, it's very, very tricky for what RJ Harvey can do as a runner. They've got Green Bay, they've got Jacksonville, and then they go into Kansas City in week 17. All three of those teams are top 10 against the rush. So this is going to be a tough one. Green Bay is a very difficult opponent. And then Jacksonville's just been lights out against opposing running backs. So this is one where I think RJ Harvey's going to have to do it as a receiver. So we'll see which way this thing goes. Another thing with RJ Harvey, which I think will be an interesting conversation this offseason, guy turns 25 years old. So unlike Jeanty and Judkins and Henderson, pretty much a finished product. Same thing with Bo Nix. The Broncos like drafting these older skill position guys for sure. Let's talk about a year 2 running back. Came back in a major way. Rich, this was I think, fantastic usage for Bucky Irving. We were told there was going to be a ramp-up week, and it was anything but. He had 17 carries in this one, caught a couple of passes, and Irving had a chance to score. He scored a touchdown, had a chance to have more. There was the big penalty. So I feel great about where Bucky Irving is headed. This was a player that gained a ton of dynasty value last year, and there's a collective Bucky Irving hive out there where I've never seen a year 2 running back who is on the smaller side and was a day 3 draft pick have this much dynasty enthusiasm, but people absolutely love Bucky Irving. Where are you at on Irving, how he projects for the rest of this season, and your view on him is he an elite sort of running back asset for dynasty managers?
I'm definitely on the pro side for Bucky Irving as well. The only thing that they did in terms of ramp up was his routes were still cut last week, but that's something I imagine will get higher. They used Rachaad White in that capacity. Before his injury, he was around the 55% mark, 55 to 60%, and that's where they kind of got him off the field. But he was running hot. He had the hot hand as a runner, like he had at the end of last year. So they just kept feeding him the football. And when you talked about RJ Harvey's remaining schedule being kind of how are we feeling? You don't feel that way about Bucky Irving at all. And one thing too, as a reminder too, early in the season, remember this Tampa Bay offensive line was just completely beat up. Before he was injured, he played one game with Tristan Wirfs. Luke Goedeke hadn't played at all at that point. So he's got both those tackles back for the remainder of the season. The remaining of the schedule is really great, and I expect his routes to kind of go up too as the ramp up process kind of continues with these guys. And the offense in general, I think, is just going to be better to close the season because they're getting guys back in the passing game all around.
Yeah, Mike Evans will be back. Chris Godwin looked really, really good. Things are sort of shaping up for Tampa Bay here. And when you mentioned that schedule, I mean, it's about as good as it gets. The Saints this week, then Atlanta next week, then they're on the road in Carolina, which is a tricky one. And then that week 17 matchup is maybe fantasy gold. We don't have to worry about the weather at all. It's in South Florida, in Miami. And you could have a Devon Achane, Bucky Irving, both guys go for 25 points. And Irving's super interesting. Bucks are super interesting. And then they're still first in the NFC South. There's a little bit of pressure being put on them from Carolina right now.
They play twice.
They play twice, and it's 7-5 Buccaneers against 7-6 Panthers. Panthers, of course, coming out of a bye. So those games will be meaningful. I think they'll lean on Bucky Irving. Really, really good stuff there. All right, Rich, let's talk about BTJ. The BTJ vibes are awful this year. He went top 15 in pretty much every draft. One of the reasons Puka Nacua was always available to you is there were people pushing BTJ ahead of him in a lot of drafts head-to-head. It's almost comical at this point. We saw BTJ miss time this season and then came back in week 13. And there's a lot of people sort of talking about the 2 wide receiver sets where you saw Parker Washington and Jacoby Myers operating in 2 wide sets. Jacoby Myers might be the wide receiver 1 in Jacksonville already. Maybe this was a quote-unquote ramp-up period for BTJ. He had 78% snap rate in this one, so he was on the field a good amount, ran 85, 86% of routes, but doesn't feel like he's a featured wide receiver in this Liam Cohen offense. Your thoughts on BTJ, what's happened this season? Way to sort of unpack this thing.
Yeah, this one's a conundrum within a conundrum because even as a rookie, he had that stretch without Trevor Lawrence and basically with every other Jaguar hurt. That was like kind of like where his jumping off point was. And that was always a tricky thing with valuing him this year where he was. It was like, are we just overweighting this sample where he was just getting fed all of these targets? And then I think a couple things happened to him early in the year. Like, well, one, he started the year with a wrist injury. Then he had a shoulder injury and an ankle injury. So he's been pretty beat up. And then I think he was kind of lost in the system a little bit as well. I don't know if he was a tremendous fit for the role he was. I'm no scout, but like, he was basically playing like that Chris Godwin-esque role. And like, I just don't think that that's his game either. I think that's why you've seen a guy like Jacoby Myers these past 2 weeks kind of have like really kind of flourish in that role. And he's been like the big first read target guy because he can do that inside out near the line of scrimmage stuff. Like he's really good at that stuff. Where that maybe isn't like Brian Thomas is like working in the middle of the field type of game. Right. And so like, I think it was like just a big pile of things that happened. And that makes it kind of tricky to diagnose moving forward because is he just not a fit for the system? Is it a Trevor Lawrence thing? Was he just hurt? Like these are all things we kind of have to factor in. I will say though, from like, as a dynasty player though, usually anytime a player with like this type of draft capital shows you like a ceiling that he kind of showed though as a rookie, usually you want to kind of believe in that player. We did this a little bit with like Ladd McConkey too, right? Like Ladd McConkey had like the back half sample and it was like mostly efficiency driven. And then he started the year slow and then has come on. I usually think that when you have a player that was like a good prospect and showed you he could still be good, you more or less still want to believe that player is good in under the hood somewhere.
Yeah, the BTJ stuff, there was like the weird trade rumors out there that people were calling on BTJ. I wonder in the back of my mind if that's going to come up again this offseason.
And we don't know that stuff, right? Like but in behind closed doors, like does Liam Cohen have a riff? Like we just lived the George Pickens experience, right? And now look at Pickens.
Yeah, it's a super odd one with BTJ. Like, never in a million years would I think that he'd regress almost 7 points per game from year one to year two. And I think it's also sort of a reminder for us in Dynasty. And I talked about this with Brett Whitefield and a number of people that we're seeing more and more wide receivers come into the league and making year one impacts, but it doesn't always go like this. It's not always like a pure upward trajectory for each and every player in the NFL. If you score a bunch of points as a rookie, it doesn't mean year two, year three, year four, you're just going to keep going up and up. I think more and more often we need to be open-minded to the fact that year one might be the best year when it comes to fantasy production with more and more rookie pass catchers, tight end included, getting this early opportunity. So I don't know, that could be a wrong one, but BTJ, if you tell me I could re-roll BTJ for a number of wide receivers this offseason coming from this upcoming wide receiver class, I'm way more open-minded to it than I thought I would have been like a year ago when BTJ was getting traded straight up for the 101 in some of these drafts I saw in rookie drafts. So BTJ, absolutely wild times. Let's talk about two rookie wide receivers. Obviously, Tetairoa McMillan is on his bye week this week in Carolina. Emeka Egbuka has had a ton of positivity this year. Which one of these would you rather roster in Dynasty? Do you have a preference for McMillan or Egbuka? And I'll take it one step further. Who would you rather have for the rest of this year's season as well?
Yeah, so still Tet for me, who I had as the wide receiver one last, draft cycle until this year. I think that there is some fit for Tet that necessarily you still have some concerns about moving forward, especially with the Panthers picking up the 5th-year option on Bryce Young, because I think there's some scheme and quarterback play that's not a complete marriage. Bryce Young is a guy that doesn't like to throw outside the numbers. He's one of the bottom quarterbacks in the league in terms of vertical accuracy and throwing outside the numbers. And that's kind of where they've had Tet operate this year. I don't think it was a coincidence that when Andy Dalton played that one game, we saw him start to get more of that full field usage or at least get the targets. Because I think that there's a lot of probably stuff if you follow probably Matt Harmon's work or something. I think when they watch Tet, it's probably some year one, maybe not completely Marvin Harrison Jr. adjacent, but you're like, this guy's winning on these routes, but he's not getting targeted on these routes. I think there's a lot of that in Tet McMillan's profile, but he still is winning in all the ways I thought he would win as a player in the NFL. He is like I said, some of the stuff with the target share and stuff doesn't show up because it's a run first offense, but as a player, proof of concept, still believe in him fully. I still believe in Egbuka too. Egbuka has had the same thing happen to him that we talked a little. It's like the injuries to Lamar Jackson. Is Baker Mayfield got super banged up like after the start of the season, and he hasn't played good enough football, and it completely overlaps this dip with Emeka Egbuka. I mean, you look at the past 6 weeks, Emeka Egbuka is the QB5, or not the QB5, the wide receiver 5 in expected points per game, and the wide receiver 38 in actual points per game. And it's because the quality of his targets have fallen off. Like he still has he's a 30% target share still over that span, but here's the kicker. 25% of his targets over that span have been inaccurate. Prior to that, it was 11.9%. Baker's been playing hurt. The quality of targets have dropped off. The problem you have rest of the season, though, is we just talked about Bucky Irving. Mike Evans is coming back. Chris Godwin's getting ramped up. Jalen McMillian could be coming back. And now that 30% target share is going to start to get chipped away at kind of the rest of the season. Where at least Tet, even if we have some concerns maybe about the fit, still with Bryce Young and then on a run first offense or inherently wants to be run first, he's still the lead dog. Like he's the lead target still, regardless. Like that's not going to be compromised when the Panthers are throwing the football. I'm sorry. Also, apologies to Coke heads out there, Jalen Coker fans.
Absolutely not. Yeah,
but
for me, I think the appropriate answer is probably both. Like you said,
yeah,
I think both are really, really good. It's sort of splitting hairs. If I had to bet, both of them will probably be somewhere inside of like the top 25 picks in redraft next year. I think there'll be a lot of steam for both of them. I think the target competition and also the offensive focal point, like talk, McMillian heading into 2026, I think is the offensive focal point in Tampa Bay. This year, Egbuka's run really, really pure in terms of lack of target competition. Bucky Irving misses a ton of time. Quarterback, huge win for Egbuka in this one. Baker is pretty much locked in. We've seen a 40 touchdown season, but I think it might be a slight lean to McMillian. Both of them, though, inside my top 10 wide receiver rankings right now. So it's sort of a splitting hairs argument, but both of them playing meaningful football down the stretch. Let's pivot over to the tight ends. Oronde Gadsden, Harold Fannin Jr., or Colston Loveland. Which one of these three guys would you take long-term in Dynasty? All three of them are sort of in an interesting spot. Harold Fannon's sort of locked in right now. I think he's, for most people, we'll have him inside, I know at Fantasy Points, somewhere inside of the tight end 1 rankings this week specifically. Gadsden, we've seen the production dip and decline. Loveland's been a little bit of a roller coaster, but more and more people starting opening themselves up to, hey, I see why the guy was drafted this early. Yeah. What's been your vibes? It's been a great tight end class, but after Tyler Warren, which of these three would you most like to have on your Dynasty rosters?
I would still have them in order of draft capital. I haven't seen enough here to make me alter my approach on all these guys. Loveland has, now that he's gotten healthy, 'cause remember he started the offseason hurt too and was coming back from that shoulder injury. Hasn't completely, overtaken Cole Kmet yet, but we've seen the ramp up over the back half of the season. I actually had tweeted a graphic over the past 6 weeks, he's actually top 20 in yards per out run among all players. Started to see some of the efficiencies, some of the stuff he could do. We just saw last week lining up out wide on Kyle Duggar, just beating him on a slant. These are things Colston Loveland can do. And I do think he's going to have more work moving forward in his career in the run game as well. They've been using a lot of Cole Kmet in that capacity, but I do think that we'll eventually see year 2, year 3, him have a significantly higher snap share, because I think he's capable in that area of the game. That's the one concern with Gadsden. You have big picture is this dude still, we have no path for him, really to say he'll be a guy that's 100% snap player. This is the Dalton Kincaid problem, right? And it's especially a problem in today's current NFL meta, because the way teams are combating the shell coverage and the big nickel is with playing more heavier sets. And if you're not able to run out of those sets, with a Dalton Kincaid, right? This is kind of his problem. I think that's the hurdle that we have with Oronde Gadsden, big picture, is if the Chargers and Harbaugh and Roman, what do they inherently want to do in their heart of hearts? We know they still want to play some power football. Yep. And that's the one hurdle Gadsden. I think you're still bullish on him, but I would still have him third because of that aspect, is that he has no path, I think, to playing run game snaps. I don't know, even maybe for his career at this point, because he's kind of a non-factor there. He's Mike Gesicki basically. And some people take that derogatory, but Mike Gesicki was a really good prospect too.
Gadsden,
and then Fannin, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead with your Fannin take. I definitely want to hear this one.
Oh, and Fannin is just like, you believe, like you just keep believing. Like this guy led the nation in receiving yards, as a prospect, and has come in and done nothing but be productive from day one in the NFL. And he's relegated David Njoku over the back half of the season. Like David Njoku's not even playing right now.
He nuked him, and Njoku was one of our best target earners for consecutive years. I might be on Fannin for this one, and
I can see it.
And when we look at like a big picture perspective, Fannin being the leading target earner in Cleveland in 2026, I think we would bet on it. It's probably unless they add some. There's potential that they take a wide receiver in the first round. I've seen a lot of people mock that. There's a potential that they end up adding a wide receiver through trade or free agency. But after that, it's like Harold Fannin is so young right now. He's one of the youngest tight ends in football, and he's been able to sort of knock David Njoku to a place where he's unplayable in fantasy, unrosterable in redraft right now for David Njoku, which is crazy. And Fannin doing it at a very young age. And you talk about like the blocking ability. Fannin's a dog. He's an absolute dog after the catch, and he's been able to hold up as a blocker. Again, one of the youngest skill position players in the NFL. So I'm very into Harold Fannin. Last question for you, Rich. This is more of a of the moment question, but it is a big effect for a lot of dynasty managers as well as redraft managers. Is Rico Dowdle still the lead back in Carolina, or do you think we see a return to what we saw at the beginning of the season with Chuba Hubbard being the more valuable player to roster in fantasy? Or is it a situation where we just have to use both of them and they're probably both flexes? Where are you at on this one?
Yeah, I would side with the latter. There was just a really good article written on this. I believe you can find it at panthers.com, written by a couple beats, Darren Grant and Cassidy Hill. So definitely I would encourage you to check that article out. The vibes from internally seem to be that like Rico Dowdle's going to get some stuff on early downs. Chuba Hubbard's going to be the passing down back and mix in as like a compliment in the run game. And then if one of these guys is running hot, like it could just take off in game. Right. And that's fantasy gamers don't want to hear that,
no,
but that's probably what's going to happen. Rico Dowdle has been pretty much a liability in pass protection. And because he hasn't run as hot the past 3 weeks, they're just like, well, we're not going to live with that. And to the degree that they did earlier, but they have a big investment in the Chuba Hubbard still. I still think Chuba Hubbard's a capable player too. Remember, he was injured as well. So I think the fact that he's healthier now too, you're starting to see him bounce back and have a little more efficiency. But in the heart of hearts of Dave Canales, like he wants to run the ball. Like this is a running team too. So there could be some meat on the bone, but unfortunately you don't have that one guy that we would like. And there's gonna be some volatility, I think, here in terms of like who gets a touchdown or who's running hot.
Yeah, and Chuba Hubbard taking on the receiving role would also really hurt. We saw with Dowdle, multiple games where he had 3 receptions or more, sort of padding those stats. We get so comfortable with a guy that sort of came out of nowhere, and then we go back to what we had at the beginning. So maybe Rico Dowdle, we'll look back on Rico Dowdle peak season and say it was great while it lasted. Maybe we're both wrong, and Rico Dowdle ends up coming back and having a huge game in Week 15. But again, the unknown is very, very tilting for us. I saw Sigmund Bloom tweet out that he would rather have Chuba Hubbard rest of the season than Rico Dowdle. Are you on that train? You would take one or the other at this point?
Man, I don't know if I have a firm stance. I think it's just volatile. I think it's going to be more of on a game to game, down to down basis. I really feel like they feel both guys are capable as runners, and it's going to basically, I think, be more vibes based on how the game's going.
Oh man, I love vibes based takes, but I don't like vibes based usage.
No one wants to hear that.
A gut punch too when it's Week 15 with money on the line in must win games for fantasy managers. Rich, this was a lot of fun. Let me know once again where they can find your work.
Yeah, Sharp Football Analysis, get into the weeds, every player, every game, and off-season stuff. I'll get to dive into the draft class. I haven't got to spend as much time on it this year with just not being able to be as involved in the college game with so much NFL work that I do. But I'm looking forward to getting into this draft class like I am every year. And hopefully we get to hook up and do something surrounding the draft when I get my feet wet and understand what's going on with this draft class. And hopefully we win this week in FFBC and we're in the dance, man. That's what I'm
absolutely. Absolutely. We're going to run Pure this week. Check out all of Rich's content. It's absolute fire. Make sure you're checking out School of Scott, Fantasy Football Daily, and then my newest podcast I'm hosting with Brett Whitefield, the 2026 NFL Draft Podcast. We just dropped episode number 1. We did an NFL mock draft. Rich, I think you'd be excited by the number of wide receivers that ended up in round 1.
All right.
It's going to be a great wide receiver class. We are stoked for it. We'll see you back every single week here on Dynasty Life. We're going to help you crush your fantasy playoffs this season.